The alarm bells rang through the command center of the Council flagship Eternal Dominance. Admiral Zethkar raised his 4 eyes from the tactical display and looked at his sensor officer with mild interest. In 300 years of service to the Galactic Council, very little surprised him anymore. "Report," he said in his calm, measured voice. The young Vorthan officer's tentacles trembled slightly as she spoke. "Sir, we have detected an unknown vessel at the edge of Sector 7. The ship appears to be primitive." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in what his species considered amusement. "Primitive? How primitive are we talking about, Officer Kelm?" "The vessel appears to be constructed primarily of iron-based alloys, sir. Their propulsion system reads as basic fusion drives. No quantum processors detected. No plasma weaponry signatures. They appear to be using some form of kinetic-based weapon system." The bridge fell silent. Several officers exchanged glances. Kinetic weapons had not been seen in Council space for over 2,000 years. They were considered a relic of less civilized times, back when species still threw rocks at each other instead of using proper energy-based combat systems. "Are you certain of these readings?" Zethkar asked. "Yes, sir. The ship is approximately 300 meters in length. Hull composition is basic steel with some titanium reinforcement. They appear to have chemical-based maneuvering thrusters and what looks like, sir, this is going to sound strange, but it appears to be some kind of magnetic acceleration system running along the length of their vessel." Zethkar stood up from his command chair. His tall insectoid frame towered over the bridge crew. "Magnetic acceleration? Are you suggesting they are using railguns?" "That appears to be the case, sir." A low buzz of conversation filled the bridge. Railguns were not just primitive, they were ancient. The technology dated back to the early space age of most civilizations. They were crude, inefficient, and completely useless against modern shielding technology. "Sir," came another voice from the communications station. "The vessel is broadcasting on old-style radio frequencies. The signal is quite weak, but we are picking up what appears to be a greeting message. Put it through the translator." The bridge speakers crackled to life with a strange, alien voice speaking in harsh, clipped tones. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Defiance. We are explorers from the Sol system, seeking peaceful contact with any intelligent life in this region of space. We come in peace and hope to establish diplomatic relations." Zethkar's mandibles clicked again. Earth. Sol system. He had heard those names before in the old survey reports. A small blue world in the outer rim with a young species that had barely discovered fire when the Council last checked on them. That was only a few thousand years ago. How had they developed space travel so quickly? "Officer Kelm, pull up the files on this Earth species." The holographic display in the center of the bridge lit up with information. Zethkar read through the brief report. Humans, bipedal mammals, short-lived, aggressive tendencies. Showed some promise for tool use but were considered too primitive for contact. The last survey had been conducted 3,000 years ago, and at that time they were still hitting each other with metal sticks. "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "they are requesting permission to approach for peaceful talks." Zethkar considered this. The protocols were clear. Any species that had achieved faster than light travel was to be brought before the Council for evaluation. If they proved suitable, they would be given junior membership status and slowly integrated into galactic civilization. If they proved unsuitable, well, that was why the Council maintained such a large military force. "Helm, bring us to intercept course. Maintain standard battle formation with the escort ships. Communications, transmit the standard first contact protocol." The Eternal Dominance was not alone in this sector of space. 3 other Council vessels accompanied it: the Swift Justice, the Harmony's Edge, and the Stellar Wisdom. Each ship was over a kilometer long, armed with the finest plasma cannons and protected by quantum-enhanced shields. They represented the peak of galactic military technology. As they approached the human vessel, Zethkar had to admit he was curious. The ship was tiny compared to Council vessels, barely larger than a Council shuttle. Its hull was marked with scorch marks and what appeared to be impact damage. Clearly, these humans had been in some kind of conflict recently. "Sir, they are responding to our first contact protocol," the communications officer reported. "They say they understand we represent a galactic government and they are honored to meet us. They request permission to send a small delegation aboard our ship for talks." "Absolutely not," Zethkar replied immediately. We will conduct preliminary discussions via communication only. If they prove worthy, we can consider face-to-face contact later. The first contact protocol was a simple series of questions designed to evaluate a species' technological level, social development, and potential threat to galactic peace. Most species failed the evaluation. Those that did were usually quietly relocated to a suitable planet where they could develop in isolation until they were ready for true civilization. Transmit the evaluation questionnaire, Zethkar ordered. For the next hour, the bridge crew listened as Captain Chen answered their questions. The humans had achieved faster-than-light travel through something they called a jump drive, a crude but functional method of folding space. They had developed fusion power and basic artificial intelligence. Their social structure was complex, with multiple competing governments that somehow managed to cooperate on space exploration. What bothered Zethkar was how calmly the human captain answered questions about warfare. When asked about their military capabilities, she readily admitted that Earth had recently been through what they called the Unification Wars, a planet-wide conflict that had ended only 50 years ago. She spoke of weapons and tactics with the casual familiarity of someone who had seen real combat. "Sir," Officer Kelm interrupted, "I am reading some unusual energy signatures from their vessel. Their magnetic acceleration system appears to be charging up." Zethkar's attention snapped back to the tactical display. Charging up? Why would they be powering weapons during a peaceful first contact? "Unknown, sir. Should I raise shields?" Before Zethkar could answer, Captain Chen's voice came over the communication system again. "Admiral Zethkar, I need to inform you that my ship has standing orders to defend itself if threatened. Your vessels have maintained weapons lock on us since you arrived. I am giving you 60 seconds to power down your targeting systems, or we will consider your actions hostile." The bridge fell silent. Zethkar could hardly believe what he was hearing. This primitive species was threatening him, their tiny ship against 4 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Communications inform Captain Chen that she is in no position to make demands. Their primitive weapons pose no threat to Council vessels. Chen's response was immediate and cold. "Admiral, you clearly do not understand humans very well. We have a saying on Earth. It is better to be judged by 12 than carried by 6. My ship carries enough firepower to crack a moon. Do not test us." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in genuine amusement now. Crack a moon? With kinetic weapons? This human clearly had no understanding of the power differential between their species. "Officer Kelm, fire a warning shot across their bow. Minimum power setting. Show them what real weapons look like." The plasma cannon on the Eternal Dominance fired a brief burst of superheated energy that streaked past the human ship. The display of power should have been enough to convince any reasonable species to surrender immediately. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ship fired back. The projectile that emerged from their ship moved faster than anything Zethkar had ever seen. It crossed the space between vessels in less than a second, punched through the Eternal Dominance's shields like they were not even there, and tore a hole completely through the ship's hull. Emergency alarms screamed across the bridge as atmosphere rushed out of the breach. Damage control teams scrambled to seal the hull, while Zethkar stared at his tactical display in shock. Their shields had not even slowed the projectile down. Captain Chen's voice came over the communication system one more time, calm and deadly serious. "Admiral, that was our warning shot. The next one will not miss your bridge. Stand down your weapons and prepare to receive our diplomatic team, or we will defend ourselves. This is humanity's first and only warning." For the first time in 300 years of military service, Admiral Zethkar did not know what to do. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of Admiral Zethkar's report reaching the home worlds. Representatives from all 12 ruling species gathered in the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime. Their various forms of agitation clear despite their different biologies. High Counselor Morvac, a towering crystalline being from the Zelthara Confederation, called the session to order with a harmonic chime that resonated through the chamber. "We are here to discuss the incident in Sector 7 involving the newly discovered species called humans. Admiral Zethkar, please present your report." Zethkar's holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber. His mandibles clicked nervously as he began. "Honored counselors, the situation in Sector 7 has escalated beyond our initial projections. The human vessel, designated UES Defiant, demonstrated weapons technology that our science division cannot fully explain. Explain? Interrupted Counselor Thrix, whose squid-like form writhed in the aquatic tank that served as his seat. They used kinetic weapons. Primitive railguns. How is there anything to explain? Honored Counselor. Their railgun projectile penetrated our quantum shields and hull armor without any measurable energy loss. Our analysis suggests the projectile was moving at approximately 30% of light speed. According to our calculations, achieving such velocity with magnetic acceleration should require a power source equivalent to a small star. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones as the various species expressed their disbelief. Counselor Vex, a mechanical being whose species had long ago transferred their consciousness into synthetic bodies, raised a metallic hand for silence. Admiral, are you suggesting that this primitive species has somehow mastered stellar-level energy generation? That seems highly unlikely for a civilization that still uses iron-based construction materials. I am only reporting what our sensors recorded, Honored Counselor. The human ship fired a single projectile that completely ignored our defensive systems. Our quantum physicists are baffled. High Counselor Morvac's crystalline form pulsed with a red glow, indicating deep thought. What was the human response after this? Demonstration? They maintained their demand for diplomatic contact. Captain Chen insisted that her species desired peaceful relations, but would defend themselves if threatened. When I attempted to assert council authority, she informed me that Earth had a fleet of 50 such vessels, and that their weapons were capable of cracking moons. 50 ships? Counselor Thrix's tentacles writhed more violently. Surely that was a bluff. Our surveys indicated they had barely achieved interplanetary travel. Our last survey was 3,000 years ago, Honored Counselor. It appears we underestimated their rate of development. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. For over 10,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained peace through strength. Their advanced technology and overwhelming military superiority ensured that younger species either joined the Council as junior members or were relocated to prevent them from becoming a threat. The idea that a primitive species could pose a genuine challenge to Council authority was almost unthinkable. Counselor Keth, a reptilian being whose scales shifted color with emotion, spoke next. What is the current status of the human vessel? After their demonstration, they withdrew from the sector. Our tracking systems lost them near the edge of our sensor range. Intelligence suggests they returned to their home system. Then we have time to prepare, High Counselor Morvac concluded. This situation must be resolved quickly before it destabilizes the region. Counselor Vex, what is the status of our military forces? The mechanical being's optical sensors glowed as he accessed the military databases. The Third Fleet is currently on patrol near the Outer Rim. 200 vessels, including the flagship Absolute Authority. The Fifth Fleet is conducting exercises in the neutral zone with another 100 ships. Combined, we have sufficient force to pacify any threat. Pacify? Counselor Thrix objected. These humans have demonstrated dangerous technology. Perhaps we should consider diplomatic options first. Diplomacy from a position of weakness is meaningless, Counselor Keth replied, his scales shifting to an aggressive orange pattern. These humans fired on a council vessel. That act alone demands response. If we allow one primitive species to defy us, others will follow. High Counselor Morvac's form pulsed through several colors, before settling on a deep blue indicating decision. Counselor Keth is correct. We cannot allow this challenge to go unanswered. However, we must also be cautious. Admiral Zethkar, you said their single weapon penetrated our shields. What if they have more such weapons? Honored Counselor, even if they possess multiple railguns, kinetic weapons have fundamental limitations. They cannot change course once fired. They cannot penetrate multiple shield layers if properly configured. And most importantly, they require direct line of sight to be effective. Our standard fleet tactics should be sufficient to neutralize the threat. Counselor Vex's optical sensors dimmed slightly. Admiral, with respect, your ship was designed to deal with energy-based weapons. Perhaps we should consider modifications to our defensive systems. There is no time for extensive modifications, Counselor Keth interjected. Every day we delay gives these humans more time to prepare. They may be sharing their technology with other species in the region. We must act swiftly. The debate continued for several hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The Galactic Council had maintained its authority for millennia through decisive action against threats to galactic stability. The humans had proven they possessed dangerous technology and had already demonstrated their willingness to use it against Council forces. High Counselor Morvac finally called for a vote. All in favor of military action to neutralize the human threat and bring their technology under Council control? 10 of the 12 counselors voted in favor. Only Counselor Thrix and the representative from the Peaceful Harmony Collective abstained. The motion is approved. Fleet Admiral Korath will assume command of the combined 3rd and 5th Fleets. Admiral Zethkar will serve as his tactical advisor. The human home system will be blockaded and their military forces neutralized. Any human vessels that surrender will be taken into custody for processing. Those that resist will be destroyed. Within days, the largest military force in Council history began assembling at the staging area near the neutral zone. 300 ships, from massive dreadnoughts to fast attack vessels, prepared for the journey to the human home system. Every vessel was equipped with the finest plasma weaponry, quantum shields, and battlefield processors that Council technology could provide. Fleet Admiral Korath, a veteran of dozens of pacification campaigns, reviewed the intelligence reports on human technology with growing confidence. Kinetic weapons were a known quantity. The Council had fought species using such weapons before, back in the early days of galactic expansion. The humans might have improved the technology, but the fundamental principles remained the same. Admiral Zethkar, Korath said as they stood on the bridge of the flagship Absolute Authority. Your report mentions that the human weapon achieved unusual velocity. Have our scientists determined how they accomplished this? The analysis is still ongoing, sir. The prevailing theory is that they have developed some form of energy storage system that allows them to charge their magnetic accelerators to extreme levels, crude but potentially effective in the short term. And their defensive capabilities? Unknown, sir. Their ship showed evidence of recent combat damage, suggesting their defensive systems are inferior to their offensive capabilities. Standard plasma bombardment should be sufficient to disable their vessels once we overcome their kinetic weapons. Korath nodded with satisfaction. The humans had managed one surprise attack against an unprepared Council vessel. They would not get a second chance. His fleet carried enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. Whatever tricks these primitives had developed, they would not be enough to stand against the full might of the Galactic Council. As the massive fleet prepared to depart for the Sol system, intelligence reports continued to flow in. Long-range sensors detected increased activity around the human homeworld. Metal extraction operations in their asteroid fields had expanded dramatically. Energy signatures suggested massive industrial construction projects throughout their solar system. They are preparing for war, Korath observed as he reviewed the latest reports. Good. Let them waste their resources on futile preparations. It will only make their defeat more complete. The fleet admiral had fought against dozens of species over his long career. Some had possessed advanced technology. Others had shown remarkable tactical intelligence. A few had even managed to inflict significant casualties on Council forces before their inevitable defeat. But none had ever won. The humans would be no different. The Galactic Council's armada set course for the Sol system, confident that they were about to teach another primitive species the price of defying galactic order. What they did not know was that humanity had spent the weeks since first contact doing what humans did best, preparing for war. And humans had always been very good at war. Fleet Admiral Korath expected many things when his armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. He expected to find a primitive civilization cowering behind their single planet. He expected to see a few dozen crude ships desperately trying to organize some kind of defense. He expected the humans to surrender quickly once they realized the hopelessness of their situation. What he did not expect was to find 50 human warships arranged in perfect battle formation between his fleet and the inner system. Sir, reported his sensor operator, a nervous young Keth whose scales flickered between colors rapidly. I am reading 53 human vessels. They appear to be similar in design to the ship that engaged Admiral Zethkar, but the operator paused, checking his readings again. But what? Korath demanded. Sir, they are larger. Much larger. The smallest vessel reads at nearly 500 meters. The largest is over 1 kilometer long. And, sir, They all appear to be armed with multiple magnetic acceleration systems. Korath moved to the tactical display and studied the human formation. The ships were arranged in a complex three-dimensional pattern that seemed almost organic in its design. Unlike council formations, which relied on simple geometric shapes for maximum overlapping fire coverage, the human arrangement seemed to flow and shift constantly. "Admiral Zethkar," he called to his tactical advisor, "are these the same type of vessels you encountered?" Zethkar's mandibles clicked nervously as he examined the display. "Sir, the basic design appears similar, but the scale is much larger. And the number of weapon systems—" He paused, running calculations. "Sir, if each of those vessels carries multiple railguns similar to the one that penetrated my ship's defenses, we could be facing several hundred kinetic weapons. Several hundred primitive kinetic weapons against 300 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy," Korath replied with confidence. "The odds remain heavily in our favor. Communications. Transmit standard surrender demand." The message that came back was not from a desperate primitive leader begging for mercy. It was from Admiral Elena Vasquez, Supreme Commander of the Earth Defense Force, and her voice carried the calm authority of someone who had spent years preparing for this exact moment. "Council Fleet, this is Admiral Vasquez. You have entered the Sol system with obvious hostile intent. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences. This is your only warning." Korath's laugh was a harsh, grating sound that echoed across the bridge. "Consequences?" "Communications transmit the following response. Human Admiral, you are facing the combined might of the Galactic Council. Your primitive weapons pose no threat to our forces. Surrender now and your species will be granted mercy. Continue to resist and you will be destroyed." The human response was immediate and devastating. Every human ship fired at once. The space between the two fleets suddenly filled with hundreds of projectiles moving at incredible speeds. Korath watched in shock as his sensors tracked the incoming kinetic weapons. They were not following simple ballistic trajectories like traditional railgun rounds. Instead, they seemed to adjust their course mid-flight, weaving between his ships in complex patterns. "Guided kinetic rounds?" Admiral Zethkar whispered in disbelief. "How is that possible?" The first wave of projectiles struck the Council fleet with devastating effect. Ship after ship reported shield failures and hull breaches as the railgun rounds punched through their defenses like they were made of paper. The quantum shields that had protected Council fleets for thousands of years simply could not handle the kinetic impact of projectiles moving at such enormous speeds. "All ships, return fire," Korath ordered. The Council fleet's response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of plasma cannons fired simultaneously, filling space with superheated energy that should have vaporized anything in its path. But the human ships were no longer where they had been when the Council fleet fired. Somehow they had moved with impossible speed, sliding sideways through space in ways that violated everything Korath knew about ship movement. "Sir," his navigation officer reported, "the human vessels appear to be using some form of enhanced maneuvering system. Their acceleration rates are far beyond what should be possible for ships of their size." Before Korath could respond, the second wave of human projectiles arrived. This time the rounds were different. Instead of single tungsten slugs, each projectile released clouds of smaller kinetic weapons just before impact. The effect was like being hit by a shotgun blast moving at 30% of light speed. 3 Council ships were destroyed outright. A dozen others reported critical damage. "How are they doing this?" Korath demanded. "Kinetic weapons cannot maneuver in flight. They certainly cannot release submunitions." Admiral Zethkar was studying the tactical display with growing alarm. "Sir, I believe they have somehow combined their kinetic weapons with basic guidance systems. The projectiles appear to carry small thruster packages that allow for course corrections." "Impossible. The energy requirements alone." "Sir, incoming transmission from the human fleet." Admiral Vasquez's voice filled the bridge again, still calm and controlled despite the devastating battle raging around her forces. "Council fleet, you have seen what our standard rounds can do. The next salvo will be our armor-piercing rounds. I suggest you reconsider your position." Korath's pride finally overcame his growing concern. All ships advanced to close range. Overwhelm them with concentrated fire. The Council fleet surged forward in standard battle formation. 300 ships moving in perfect coordination, their plasma weapons firing continuously to create an impenetrable wall of energy. Between them and the human forces, the Human response was unlike anything in Council military history. Instead of trying to punch through the plasma barrage, the human ships simply went around it. They moved in 3 dimensions, diving below the plane of battle and rising above it, approaching from angles that Council formations were not designed to defend against. Their guided kinetic rounds came from dozens of different vectors simultaneously, making point defense impossible. But worse than the tactical surprise was the realization that the humans were learning and adapting with each exchange. Their first salvo had tested Council defenses. Their second had exploited weaknesses they discovered. Their third wave introduced new weapon types that Council sensors had never seen before. "Sir," the sensor operator reported, his scales now a steady pattern of fear-induced gray. "The humans are firing some kind of phasing rounds. They are passing completely through our shields without triggering them." Korath watched in horror as projectiles that should not have been able to exist somehow passed through solid matter and energy barriers to strike the vulnerable internal systems of his ships. Power cores exploded. Life support systems failed. Entire vessel simply stopped responding to commands. "All ships fall back to defensive formation Delta 7, he ordered, but the humans were not content to let them retreat. As the Council fleet tried to reorganize, human ships that had been hanging back at the edge of sensor range suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds. They were not using any form of faster-than-light travel that Council science recognized, but somehow they crossed vast distances in seconds. Admiral Vasquez's voice came over the communications again. "Council fleet, you have now seen our kinetic weapons, our guided munitions, our armor-piercing rounds, and our phasing projectiles. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawing from this system before we demonstrate our antimatter warheads." The threat was so absurd that Korath almost laughed. Antimatter was one of the most dangerous and difficult substances in the universe to weaponize. Even the Council only used it in their largest strategic weapons, and only under the most controlled conditions. The idea that these primitives had somehow managed to mount antimatter warheads on kinetic weapons was beyond belief. Then the human ships fired. Again, the projectiles that emerged from their railguns were different from anything they had used before. They moved more slowly than the previous rounds, and they seemed to be surrounded by some kind of containment field that made them glow with an eerie blue light. When the first antimatter round struck a Council heavy cruiser, the explosion was visible from across the solar system. The ship did not just explode, it was converted directly into energy in a flash that temporarily outshone the local star. The shockwave from the blast damaged 3 other vessels and sent debris flying at relativistic speeds. Korath stared at the tactical display in shock. In less than an hour, these primitive humans had destroyed or disabled nearly a quarter of his fleet. Their weapons technology was not just more advanced than expected, it was revolutionary. They had somehow taken the most basic concept in warfare, throwing rocks at your enemy, and elevated it to an art form that made Council weapons look like toys. "Sir," Admiral Zethkar said quietly, "I recommend we withdraw and request reinforcements." For the first time in his long military career, Fleet Admiral Korath was forced to agree. The greatest military force in Council history was being systematically destroyed by a species that still used metal ships and chemical rockets. As he gave the order to retreat, Korath realized that everything the Council thought they knew about warfare was wrong. These humans had not just built better weapons, they had built weapons that operated on completely diff 6. Months had passed since Fleet Admiral Korath's first disastrous encounter with the human defense fleet, and the siege of Sol had become a grinding war of attrition that defied everything the Galactic Council understood about warfare. What should have been a simple pacification campaign had turned into the longest military engagement in Council history. The war room aboard the Absolute Authority had been converted into a maze of tactical displays, sensor analysis stations, and communication arrays. Korath stood at the center of it all, studying the latest intelligence reports with growing frustration. Around him, his senior staff worked frantically to understand how a primitive species was managing to hold off the combined might of galactic civilization. "Report," Korath ordered as Admiral Zethkar approached with another data pad. "Sir, the humans have completed construction of their latest orbital facility. Intelligence suggests it is some form of automated weapons platform. That brings their total defensive installations to over 200 individual gun batteries throughout the system. Korath gestured at the holographic display showing the Sol system. Every asteroid, moon, and orbital platform was now marked with weapon signatures. The humans had turned their entire solar system into a fortress. How are they manufacturing so many weapons so quickly? Our analysis suggests they have converted their entire industrial base to weapons production. Every mining station, every manufacturing facility, every orbital habitat is now producing military hardware. Sir, they are not just building more weapons, they are building better ones. The proof of that statement was evident in the wreckage floating throughout the outer system. Over the past 6 months, the Council had sent wave after wave of ships against the human defenses. Each assault had been met with new and increasingly devastating weapons technology. First had come the smart rounds, kinetic projectiles that could adjust their course to track moving targets. Then came the cluster munitions that released hundreds of smaller projectiles to overwhelm point defenses. After that came the phasing rounds that could somehow pass through solid matter to strike internal systems. But it was the latest development that truly worried. Korath temporal weapons, show me the analysis of yesterday's engagement, he ordered. The holographic display shifted to show a recorded battle sequence. A Council assault force had approached one of the outer defensive platforms, maintaining tight formation and maximum shield strength. The human response had been swift and impossible. Watch carefully, sir, Admiral Zethkar said. The human platform fires at precisely 14:32:17 system time. On the display, Korath could see the railgun platform discharge its weapon. But instead of a projectile moving toward the Council ships, the round seemed to appear inside the formation itself, striking the lead vessel before the platform had even finished firing. Our chronometer readings confirm that the impact occurred 0.3 seconds before the weapon was fired. Zethkar continued. Somehow the humans have developed kinetic weapons that fire backwards through time. That is impossible, Korath stated flatly. Temporal manipulation requires exotic matter and energy sources beyond anything a primitive civilization could achieve. Nevertheless, sir, we have lost 17 ships to these temporal kinetic weapons. Our scientists cannot explain how they work, but the effect is undeniable. Korath turned away from the display, his mind struggling to process the implications. The humans were not just building better weapons. They were building weapons that violated the fundamental laws of physics, as the Council understood them. Every engagement revealed new innovations that should have been impossible for their level of technology. Sir, came a voice from the communication station. Priority message from the Council chambers on Nexus Prime. The holographic image of High Counselor Morvac appeared in the center of the war room. The crystalline being's form was pulsing with angry red patterns. Fleet Admiral Korath, explain to me how a primitive species with metal ships and chemical rockets has managed to hold off the finest military force in galactic history for 6 months. Honored Counselor, the humans have demonstrated technological capabilities far beyond our initial estimates. Their kinetic weapons have proven remarkably effective against our defensive systems. Kinetic weapons! Morvac's form flashed through several colors indicating extreme agitation. They are throwing rocks, Admiral, rocks! How is it possible that rocks are destroying ships equipped with quantum shields and plasma cannons? Sir, they are not simply throwing rocks. The humans have somehow combined kinetic weapons technology with guidance systems, exotic matter manipulation, and temporal displacement capabilities that our science division cannot explain. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Morvac spoke again, his harmonic voice carrying a dangerous edge. Admiral, are you telling me that this primitive species has developed weapons technology superior to our own? Korath chose his words carefully. I am saying that they have developed weapons technology that is different from our own, and that our current defensive systems are not adequate to counter their capabilities. Then adapt. Modify your shields. Develop new tactics. Do whatever is necessary to end this embarrassment before it spreads to other sectors. Sir, we have attempted multiple modifications to our defensive systems. The humans seem to adapt their weapons to counter every change we make. It is as if they are using each engagement as a test of our capabilities. That is ridiculous. How could a primitive species possibly learn faster than our most advanced tactical computers? Before Korath could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. His tactical officer called out in alarm, Sir, massive energy signatures detected throughout the inner system. The humans appeared to be powering up some kind of new weapon system. The display showed the Sol system, with energy readings spiking at locations throughout the inner planets. Whatever the humans were preparing, it was on a scale that dwarfed their previous weapons demonstrations. "Sir," the sensor operator reported, "we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet." Admiral Vasquez's image appeared on the display, but she was no longer on the bridge of a ship. Behind her, Korath could see what appeared to be a massive command center with hundreds of technicians working at various stations. "Council Fleet Admiral," she began, "for 6 months you have thrown wave after wave of ships at our defenses. Each time we have shown you new ways to use kinetic weapons. We have guided them, clustered them, phased them, and sent them through time. You still do not understand what you are facing." "Human Admiral," Korath replied, "your primitive weapons cannot stand against the full might of the Galactic Council forever. We have barely committed a fraction of our total military strength to this conflict." Vasquez smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral, everything you have seen so far has been kinetic weapons technology. Railguns throwing various types of projectiles at very high speeds. We have been testing these systems against your defenses for 6 months now, gathering data and refining our approach." "Testing?" Korath felt a chill run through his insectoid body. "Yes, testing. You see, Admiral, while you have been learning about our kinetic weapons, our real scientists have been working on something completely different. We call it Project Hermes." The energy readings throughout the Sol system suddenly spiked to levels that made Korath's sensors overload. Whatever the humans had been building for the past 6 months was about to be revealed. "You have shown us the effectiveness of plasma weapons and energy shields," Vasquez continued. "You have demonstrated your tactical formations and strategic thinking. You have given us detailed scans of your ship designs and defensive capabilities. Thank you for the education." "What are you talking about?" Korath demanded. "Admiral, did you really think we were fighting this war with our best technology? Did you think a species that could build temporal kinetic weapons couldn't build something even more interesting?" The human admiral paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a note of almost casual menace. "You see, while we were keeping you busy with our railguns, we solved a much more fundamental problem. We figured out how to move very large objects across very large distances instantaneously." Korath's blood turned to ice as he realized what she was saying. "Teleportation technology? We prefer to call it tactical relocation." "And Admiral?" Vasquez smiled again. "Your education period is now complete. Classes dismissed. The human fleet simply vanished. Every ship, every orbital platform, every defensive installation throughout the Sol system disappeared simultaneously. One moment they were there on the sensors. The next moment space was empty except for the Council fleet and the floating wreckage of 6 months of bitter fighting. Where did they go?" Korath whispered. His answer came from every direction at once as the human fleet reappeared in perfect formation around the Council ships. They had not retreated or regrouped. They had simply moved to optimal firing positions in the blink of an eye. But worse than the tactical surprise was the realization that came with it. The humans had been fighting this entire war with their second-best technology, using the Council fleet as a testing ground for weapons development, while their real scientists. The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Representatives from all 12 ruling species sat in stunned silence as they listened to Fleet Admiral Korath's final report. The holographic displays around the chamber showed the devastating statistics. 300 ships had entered the Sol system 6 months ago. Fewer than 50 had returned, and most of those were heavily damaged. High Counselor Morvac's crystalline form pulsed through a spectrum of colors that had no equivalent in any known emotional state. When he finally spoke, his harmonic voice carried a note of barely controlled panic. "Admiral, you are telling us that this primitive species not only defeated our largest military force, but that they were essentially toying with us the entire time?" "That appears to be correct, Honored Counselor," Korath replied. His once proud bearing had been replaced by the slumped posture of a thoroughly defeated soldier. "Our intelligence analysis suggests that everything we encountered during the siege was essentially a field test of their secondary weapon systems." "Secondary systems?" Counselor Keth's scales had shifted to a pattern of deep purple that indicated profound confusion. "You mean those temporal kinetic weapons were not their primary military technology?" "No, sir. According to intercepted communications, their kinetic weapons program was run by what they called the graduate students. Their primary research teams were working on what they referred to as the really interesting stuff. Counselor Vex's optical sensors dimmed as he processed this information. Admiral, please explain how a species using iron-based construction materials managed to develop technology that our most advanced science divisions cannot understand. Korath activated a holographic display showing various human weapon systems. Honored counselors, I believe we have fundamentally misunderstood the nature of technological advancement. We have always assumed that superior technology must be more complex, more exotic, more theoretically sophisticated. The humans have taken the opposite approach. The display showed a comparison between a council plasma cannon and a human railgun. The plasma weapon was a marvel of engineering, with quantum field generators, exotic matter containment systems, and computational arrays that could calculate targeting solutions across multiple dimensions. The railgun was essentially a magnetic tube that threw metal objects very quickly. The human approach to warfare is not to build the most advanced weapon possible, Korath continued. It is to build the most effective weapon possible. They started with the simple concept of throwing rocks at their enemies, and then they systematically addressed every limitation of that approach. Such as, High Counselor Morvac asked, rocks cannot change direction after being thrown, so they built guidance systems. Rocks cannot penetrate armor, so they built armor-piercing rounds. Rocks cannot affect multiple targets, so they built cluster munitions. Rocks travel slowly compared to energy weapons, so they found ways to accelerate them to near light speed. Rocks exist in only one timeline, so they found ways to fire them through time itself. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and harmonic tones as the various species expressed their disbelief. Counselor Thrix's tentacles writhed in agitation as he spoke. You are describing technological advances that should require thousands of years of research and development. How did they achieve so much in so little time? Because they approached each problem as an engineering challenge rather than a theoretical exercise, Korath replied. While our scientists spend decades developing elegant mathematical models, human engineers build prototypes and test them in real conditions. They treat failure as data rather than embarrassment. Admiral Zethkar, who had been silent throughout the briefing, finally spoke. Honored counselors, there is something else. During the final engagement, we intercepted communications between human ships. They were not just testing their weapons against us. They were testing their tactics, their logistics, their command structures. They used our fleet as a comprehensive training exercise. Training for what? Counselor Keth demanded. Unknown, sir. But the implications are troubling. If they could defeat our largest military force while treating it as a training exercise, what are they preparing to face that would require such preparation? High Counselor Morvac's form shifted through several colors before settling on a deep, concerned blue. Admiral, what is your assessment of human military capabilities based on what we observed? Korath paused, choosing his words carefully. Honored Counselor, based on their demonstrated technology, I believe the humans could conquer the entire galaxy if they chose to do so. The chamber fell silent again. The statement was so absurd that many of the counselors simply could not process it. A primitive species that had achieved spaceflight only recently was supposedly capable of defeating a galactic civilization that had endured for thousands of years. That is impossible, Counselor Vex stated flatly. They have 50 ships. We have millions. Sir, they have demonstrated the ability to instantly teleport entire fleets across vast distances. Traditional military strategy becomes meaningless when the enemy can appear anywhere at any time. More importantly, they have shown the ability to rapidly develop new weapon systems to counter any defensive measure we employ. What do you recommend? High Counselor Morvac asked. Immediate diplomatic contact. We need to understand their intentions and hopefully negotiate some form of peaceful coexistence before they decide that the galaxy needs to be reorganized under human management. The debate that followed lasted for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. For the first time in galactic history, the Galactic Council would approach a primitive species not as conquerors or benefactors, but as equals seeking peace. The formal diplomatic mission to Sol System was led by High Counselor Morvac himself, aboard an unarmed ceremonial vessel flying flags of truce. The response from Earth was immediate and surprising. They were invited to land at a facility on the human homeworld for face-to-face negotiations. The meeting took place in a simple conference room in what the humans called Geneva. No exotic technology, no impressive displays of power, just a wooden table and comfortable chairs. Admiral Vasquez sat across from the council delegation with a small team of human diplomats. "Honored counselors," she began, "we appreciate your willingness to pursue diplomatic solutions. We had hoped this would be your eventual response." "Admiral," High Counselor Morvac replied, "we must ask directly, what are humanity's intentions regarding the rest of the galaxy?" Vasquez smiled. "Counselor, humanity has no interest in conquering the galaxy. We have enough problems managing one planet without trying to run thousands of them. However, we also have no intention of allowing anyone else to dictate our development or our choices." "Then what do you want?" "We want to be left alone to develop in peace. We want trade relationships with species that share our values, and we want it clearly understood that humanity will defend itself against any threats, no matter how powerful those threats believe themselves to be." Counselor Keth leaned forward. "Admiral, your species has demonstrated military capabilities that exceed anything we have ever encountered. How can we be certain you will not use that power against peaceful species?" "Because," Vasquez replied, "we have already demonstrated restraint. Your fleet attacked our home system. By any reasonable standard, that was an act of war that would justify retaliation against your home worlds. Instead, we simply sent you home with a clear message about the consequences of future aggression." The negotiations continued for days, but the fundamental understanding was established in that first meeting. Humanity would be recognized as a sovereign species, with full rights and protections under galactic law. In exchange, they would agree to limit their military expansion and share certain non-weapons technologies with the Council. What was not discussed, but clearly understood by all parties, was that the balance of power in the galaxy had fundamentally shifted. The Galactic Council remained the nominal government of galactic civilization, but everyone knew that humanity could end that government whenever they chose to do so. 6 months later, Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of a new ship, watching as human cargo vessels moved through Council space carrying trade goods and technological innovations. The humans had kept their word about sharing non-military technology, and the results were revolutionary. Medical techniques that could regrow entire limbs. Manufacturing processes that could produce complex goods at a fraction of the traditional cost. Energy systems that were both more efficient and more reliable than anything the Council had developed. But it was the human approach to these technologies that truly amazed him. Where Council science was elegant and theoretical, human engineering was practical and adaptable. They built things that worked under real conditions, not just in laboratory settings. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving a priority message from Earth." Admiral Vasquez appeared on the display, but she was not wearing her military uniform. Instead, she wore civilian clothes and appeared to be in some kind of garden. "Admiral Zethkar, I hope you are well. I wanted to personally inform you that I am retiring from military service. After spending 6 months fighting your fleet, I have decided to return to my original profession.